Greetings once again, my friends, and live from Retro Central, my name is Peter, and this is a new episode of Consolation, the video series. As always, I thank you very much for taking the time to check out my work. I really do appreciate it. A special hello to my friends and readers at Retroware who are checking out this video as part of my latest article on the site. Hello to all of you. Flashing back to the late 1980s and throughout most of the 1990s, the internet really wasn't a thing yet for mass consumption. Some people were able to look at it during the mid and especially late 1990s if they had money for personal computers, but a lot of us, if we wanted the latest and greatest video game news, notes, and information, had to get it through magazines that were published usually once a month. Magazines including Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Fan, Game Pro, Next Generation, Game Players, and Video Games and Computer Entertainment. Admittedly, I bought all of those magazines, and foolishly I didn't subscribe to one. I actually made it a monthly thing to go to my local bookstore, buy all of these issues en masse, and just read them during break times at work. And I was the most knowledgeable video game guy around. If people had questions about a video game or video game system, they always asked me. I loved being the answer point guy. And one of the reasons why I pride myself on my video game knowledge today. Reading those magazines comprises a lot of that knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. One magazine that I didn't mention, though, is one of my favorites, if not my favorite of all time. And that magazine, my friends, is Nintendo Power. A magazine that a lot of my fellow video creators and written content creators have talked about time and time again, and with good reason. It's a fantastic magazine covering Nintendo systems, games coming out for those systems, culture references relating to those games and those systems, and more, even technical information at times. It was always awesome to get an issue of this and to dig right in. And in this particular episode, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this particular issue, which is volume number 46, released in March of 1993. Now, on the inside of the magazine, what you first see is want more power. They want you to subscribe or renew your subscription right away. In fact, I wrote the phone number up on my whiteboard. I like this particular ad better than others that would come later with jars of fingernail clippings and other weird advertising aspects. This was very simple. I love the atom right here. I love the color. The fact that they offered, with a subscription, some Power Player coupons and a Super Power issue, plus the Power Trading cards, which I'll get to very shortly, really made up a good deal. And eventually I did get a year subscription to the magazine. Once you get on the inside, you usually saw another advertisement. This particular issue talks about Super Nintendo sports games. Probably because the Sega Genesis was beating the pants off the Super Nintendo in this particular category. And no offense to Nintendo, I love them to death, but Genesis just owned sports during the 16-bit era, sorry. Aside from the Tecmo games, everything else was all Genesis. But they list here all of these games in the yellow box, which you can't see, but games including Battle Dodgeball, Bionic Volleyball, Brett Hull Hockey, the IRM Skins game, which I do own, which is pretty good. Super Power Punch, Super Play Action Football, WWF WrestleMania, and more. Then we get to the table of contents. There were always letters, and I'm not going to read these letters. There's actually some letters, specific letters, that I'm saving for the end of the video, but they had letters that you could write to the editors that sometimes they would publish and sometimes they would not. And then we got to the good stuff. And in this particular issue, the good stuff hits like a ton of bricks. This is a look at Star Fox for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. One of my favorite games for that platform, and a game that owned me for the March, April, May timeframe of 1993. What this magazine doesn't talk about, which happened in April of 93, was the Super Star Fox Weekend Competition, which was a competition at various mall locations across the country, where you played a specific competition version of the game in order to accumulate as many points as possible in a limited amount of time. Everyone who wanted a particular location got a flight jacket sent straight from Nintendo, one that I used to own until I wore it so it got so many holes in it I had to throw it away, which in retrospect was dumb, but that's what happened. But we got to take a look at Star Fox and some of its elements here. For example, it shows some of the graphics, breaks down the R-Wing in its technology on this side. Get to take a look at some of the characters as well. So we got to take a very good look at Star Fox early on. And then we got to look at Super Strike Eagle. I'm not going to show that to you. Oh boy. Probably have heard of this one. This is Wayne's World for the Super Nintendo. And then the really bad speech bubbles. I'm your excellent host for this video game, Wayne Campbell. With me as always is Garth. Not. He's been captured by a gelatinous cube and I've got to save him. Whoa! Please. Anyway, we all know that Wayne's World wound up being bad, so we'll go ahead and we'll skip it. Then we get to the highlight of the issue, which is Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Bust Loose, which is a fantastic game for the Super Nintendo, by the way, published by Konami before they went south. This gives you walkthroughs of all the stages, where they capture each particular screen and they put it together into a map, which I thought was very helpful. Each issue of Nintendo Power had its own poster. This one happens to be Tasmania, which relates to the Tiny Toons theme. And on the back of that poster, I'll try and make it so you can see, although it's a little difficult, is a full-on layout of some of the later stages of Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Bust Loose. That's the reason why I haven't taken this poster out and hung it up, is because these maps are actually pretty valuable. So that's a look at the game portion of the magazine. There are also comics as well, such as Nestor's Adventures. Or, if we flash forward just a little bit, there was a Star Fox comic in many of the issues during this particular time frame. I love the artwork. It's kind of edgy without being too dark, and I like that. And it expands the Star Fox universe. In addition, if you like talking smack to your friends about the most popular games for your particular system, well, you don't have to look any further, because there were top 20 lists where you could look at the top games for Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and NES. Ah, look at that. Street Fighter II beat Super Mario Kart that particular month. Well, good. Anything Mario always seemed to be number one in a lot of these lists. So whenever we saw something that either wasn't Mario or wasn't Nintendo, then we knew it was a pretty big deal. And we saw it twice in this particular issue, with Street Fighter II for the Super and Tecmo Super Bowl for the regular NES. On the Game Boy, of course, the top three games are all Nintendo games. Super Mario Land 2, Metroid 2, and Kirby's Dream Land. Also in this magazine, they break down each of the games that they cover. Brawl Brothers, Tiny Toon Adventures, Wayne's World, and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego are just some of the games that they talk about, and they write little capsulated reviews for, as well as giving scores in this matrix right here. And then at the very end of the magazine, and this happened a lot during 93 and 94, the Super Power Club trading cards, which you got to perforate, separate, and then put together into full collections. So you had artwork from all of the games, and on the back, which I thought was the coolest part, there are little challenges with novice, intermediate, and pro levels that you could try and fulfill yourself. For example, for RC Pro-Am Racing, grab your remote control and head for the tracks in the classic NES racing game. On level 12, how many enemy cars can you destroy? Now, you don't have a meter that shows you how many, so you have to keep counting your head. For novices, it's 15, for intermediate, 25, and for pro, 35. So you got little challenges like that. And I point to those a lot as where our achievement system for the Xbox 360 and forward really came from. Nintendo Power is one of my favorite magazines. I have a lot of memories of Nintendo Power, not only of reading the magazine, but also of where I was at the time that each issue was made. March 1993, of course, I've talked about where I was, living in Worcester, Massachusetts, or just outside of Worcester, Massachusetts, still working as a long-distance operator for AT&T, back when long-distance operators were still a thing. Was dating a girl at the time. Her name is Lisa. Played video games with her brother Bobby. Wound up losing my job at the phone company when they downsized less than a year later, and wound up having to move back to Chicopee, Mass. But Nintendo Power was a magazine that I always would buy and I would read every month. And this was one that I actually did own. Before wrapping this video up, I did promise to read a couple of letters, and I'm going to do that now. We're going to flash forward to September of 1995, which is about 20 years ago, a little less or a little more than 20 years ago now. In setting the scene, this was when the Nintendo Ultra 64 was still in development, and they didn't have a date for it yet, but it was coming. So there are two letters here that I want to read. One is from Mike Pascal from Louisville, Kentucky. And Mike writes, "Some people at my school think Sega is better than Nintendo. Come on, people. Who would buy a $400 system that's only 32 bits? The speed of its CD-ROM drive is as fast as that stupid hedgehog with no legs." Yeah, I'll let that sink in for just a minute. Hedgehog with... Sonic has... Anyway. I just know Nintendo is going to make Sega wet their pants with the Nintendo Ultra 64 and the... and the Virtual Boy. Oh, man, that gets me every time I read it. Okay. Right. Thanks, Nintendo, for making a product that is durable, inexpensive, easy to use, and has graphics like I have never seen before. Nintendo fanboyism, ladies and gentlemen, alive since 1995. Let's do one more letter before we wrap up this video. This one's from Trevor and Stephen Green in Woodridge, Illinois, and they write, "We have just received issue 73, and it was the best ever. As we were flipping through it, we saw something that shocked us so bad, we nearly fainted." Yikes. Staring at us was the finest looking video game system ever produced. Forget the Sega Saturn. We're talking about the Nintendo Ultra 64, the best system ever. Even though they haven't played it yet. Everything we ever wanted in a video game system was right there. The 4-player controller outlets for multiplayer fun without an expensive adapter. Okay, point there. A beautiful black control deck. Okay. And what's this? Cartridges, no CDs. Yes, thank you. Yeah, people were pretty crazy about the Ultra 64. And while the Nintendo 64 was certainly a good system, I certainly won't sell it short. Maybe that enthusiasm was just a bit overstated before the system had come out. We were still a year away from release at that point. Anyway, that's a look back at Nintendo Power, one of the coolest video game magazines of all time, and one that I can always go back and read, reread, and re-reread time and time again and not lose a single thing. I thank you very much for taking the time to check out this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed shooting it. And until the next time, my friends, take care.